Welcome to our program on Quebec Radio.
Welcome, dear friends, to Cardiac Radio, here in another health and spirituality program. We've been here with you for 10 years, and now a new opportunity in which we can interact through these different platforms, different channels at Cardiac Radio. And today, we're talking about past life. Yes, the continuity of life, reincarnatory program, however we want to call it. You and I know that we reincarnate with a plan. The question is, are we fulfilling it? What may be hindering us from accomplishing the milestones of our soul in this life? Life is so serious, and yet so much joy in the opportunity of expanding our potentialities. We here today have the opportunity to meditate this about ourselves as we learn about other people's lives. We have here with us Joanne DiMaggio. She is here again at Cardiac Radio. Once only audio, now audio and video. What a joy for us to see her, to be with us as if we are in a meeting with her. She's going to be talking about several things, but specifically about the book, the latest book, Edgar Cayce and the Unfulfilled Destiny of Thomas Jefferson. Cardiac Radio is located in Northern Virginia, and we are healthily proud to be in the very lands of Thomas Jefferson, a man, a spirit who was a missionary. He changed all of our destinies with his own life, but he's still evolving, he's progressing. And what if he reincarnated? What was the plan all about? We're going to talk about this and much more with a scholar in the field of many lives. Joanne DiMaggio, if you go to her website, joannedimaggio.com, you will see that she has lengthy experience in regards to many lives. She is an internationally recognized researcher, teacher, author, past life therapist. She has published 6 books and hundreds of articles in different magazines. She has a beautiful professional and personal life to share with us, insights that may be very helpful to our very reincarnation. I'm going to share here with you in our chat, in all of our platforms, her very website for your reference. And I would like to ask you to kindly welcome her with your loving vibrations as she joins us here at Cardiac Radio. Thank you, Joanne, for being here with us once again. And now we can see you. How have you been?
Good. It's my pleasure to be with you, Vanessa. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you, Joanne. Joanne, we know this pandemic has been bringing lots of opportunities for people. And at the very beginning of it in 2020, you published your latest book.
Right.
We know there is no coincidence, but would you like to share with us a little bit of the making of the book?
Oh, sure. This book took me 8 years to complete, but the idea for it came much earlier. I moved to Virginia in 1995, and before I had joined the Edgar Cayce's Association for Research and Enlightenment, which is headquartered in Virginia Beach. I did that in 1987, right after Shirley MacLaine had come out with Out on a Limb. It was made into a miniseries. Maybe some of your listeners will remember that. When I joined, a friend of mine who was also in the ARE said to me, she knew that I had an interest in history. I was a history major in college. and I was also a writer. And she said to me, um, Edgar Cayce did a reading on a baby boy when he was only a few days old and said he was the reincarnation of Thomas Jefferson and Alexander the Great. And I said, really? Well, that's interesting. And she said, yeah. So I went into the Cayce readings and I looked up his reading. Mr. Cayce, when he would give readings to people, he would assign a number to them so that when you go in the readings, they don't say the name of the person, but they have a number. And I knew that the number of this soul was 1208. So I went into the Cayce readings and looked up 1208 and read it. I was astounded. In that very first reading, Mr. Cayce said, I remember TJ was only 2 days old when he gave him this reading. He said, this soul can do for the world what Thomas Jefferson did for this country.
Wow.
Well, I knew he didn't do it. So I was just like any curious reporter. I think of myself sometimes as a reporter for the universe. I wanted to find out why. What happened? Why didn't that happen? So that set me on a course of trying to find him so that I could talk to him and maybe write an article. I didn't really think about it in terms of a book. So that was the genesis of it. And I moved to Virginia in 1995, and I met him in 1996. And that's a whole other story into itself, which I won't get into. But after that, I talked to him, asked him if he would be interested in exploring doing a book together, and he said yes. And we had some, on and off kind of relationship. Sometimes he'd disappear on me for years at a time. And then we would somehow get back together. That was spirit at work. And so eventually I after many trips to the Edgar Cayce Foundation, looking in the archives at all of his files, talking to him, sponsoring talks that he was giving to local people here in Charlottesville, I was able to piece together his life story and hopefully share with the readers the journey of his soul.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. Just a parenthesis for those who are here with us. Last year, we were able as a family to visit the area again in Virginia Beach, and it's such a phenomenal place. It's grown so much and it's expanded. In spite of the pandemic, people were there and everything's so organized. It's like a hidden treasure
It is.
in America, right?
It is. And that library that they have, I think, is second to none in terms of the sheer number of metaphysical or esoteric books that are there. When I go there, I spend most of my time in the library because I just love to sit there and feel all the energy coming off of all those books. For a writer, it's a paradise. It really is. So it's just, and they have wonderful programs. Members get a magazine. There's just, if you go on edgarcayce.org, you can find out more about it. But it's just for anybody on the metaphysical path or spiritual path. I would highly recommend looking into the ARE.
Yes, you're right. And when we talk about Edgar Cayce, so we can go back to the book, contextualizing here, and much about him. For those who are not very familiar, he was quite remarkable in his and for us spiritists we would say mediumistic abilities. I know some people don't want to say that, but it's mediumistic abilities in a way, and the much that he had done for many people, but especially for the advancements of energy medicine in a way, right?
Oh, exactly. In his lifetime, he gave over 14,000 readings. And of those 14,000, 12,000 of them were health readings. That's how he started, really. Didn't get into the life readings until much later, which is where all the reincarnation information starts to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
But he is considered the father of holistic medicine. I think a lot of the things that people would come to him from all over who had exhausted, traditional medicine, they had maybe a chronic illness or something like that, he would often tell them the source of the illness, and then he would prescribe a remedy. Those remedies are still available today. I just think he was just so far ahead of his time. We're only catching up to him now. So that's a treasure trove right there, just of the physical issues that he dealt with from A to Z. I mean, you can find the remedy for almost anything. And then later on, like I said, the other 2,000 or so readings are life readings that he gave people, and that's when we got into the more esoteric topics.
Okay. Now, you as a past life regression therapist, you know that when we enter the realm of previous lives, we need to be very cautious because we're talking about the structure of the person's mind, feelings, etc. So Edgar Cayce was so ethical.
Yes.
And as we enter the book that you wrote and the long research and the depth of the book, first question is, some people think it was just out of, he would give this reading without any consequence, but he showed in his whole lifetime in his practice that he was very ethical,
Yeah.
very careful. He wouldn't in any way means give such a reading just because, right?
Right. And with this soul, it was an unusual circumstance. Most of the time, when Cayce would give a reading, he really wouldn't know the person he was giving the reading for. TJ Davis is the person we're talking about. Thomas Jefferson Davis. Mr. Cayce named him.
Yeah.
Uh, TJ was the nephew of Cayce's beloved secretary, Gladys Davis. TJ tells the story that, when TJ was still in spirit, that he wanted to come in and be a part of Cayce's life this incarnation. They had been together many times before. And so TJ wanted to come in, but the only way he could come in, and I describe this in the book, is to come in through Gladys's brother, Boyd Davis, and his wife, Berlin. Because TJ knew that his parents would be alcoholics and gamblers and that they really wouldn't want a baby. And then that way, they'd give him over to Gladys, and then Gladys would take him to Edgar. So it was quite beautiful the way it all worked out. So Mr. Cayce knew TJ from many, many prior incarnations. And when he was 2 days old, the doctors thought he was going to die because he had been in his mother's womb and she'd been an alcoholic. And he said when he was born, his body was dry like a piece of wood. And so Edgar said to Gladys, "Bring him over here and I'll take care of him." And he brought him over, and he gave him a reading, told Gladys what to do for his physical well-being, which worked. He recovered. And then at that point, TJ began his journey with Cayce. Now, Cayce did make that statement about his past life as Jefferson and Alexander, but he also gave him 2 other past lives at that point. But we don't really get into that too much because there's really very little information about those other 2. One was in Atlantis, by the way, and the other one was in the early history of France. And so, but it was that reading that he gave about this soul could do for the world what Jefferson did for this country, which became I would say the most pivotal part of TJ's life, because everybody at the ARE knew who he was, had been in a past life, because everybody at the ARE, they knew each other's past lives. This was common. This was as common for them to talk about at the kitchen table as, somebody else would talk about the weather. So this was, they knew who he had been. They knew what the reading had predicted. And so they were all kind of watching him to see any signs of the Jefferson life coming forward. And what would he do for the world? They were all anxiously awaiting, for this to happen. So this is something he lived with from, like I said, the time he was 2 days old until today. So it's just a fascinating look at whoever you had been in a previous life. It almost, it was like you don't constantly go higher, higher, higher each lifetime. There are times when, your life goes like this and then it goes down. And, Casey said, in that life, the soul gains, or in that life, the soul lost. So it really just depends on working through your karma and about choices that we make with our free will. So that's really and the choices that he made and the choices that his parents made when he was too young to make decisions on his own is why his soul went on a whole different trajectory than what Casey thought it would.
And but Joanne, not everybody is ready to remember previous lives. That's why we forget, right? Because most likely we cannot handle the truth. Do you think it was first and foremost a lot of pressure?
I think that I asked TJ that. I said, would you have rather not known? And he said, yeah, you shouldn't tell a child, you know, that kind of a burden on him. How could you ever be the late, great Thomas Jefferson again, And so it was a burden for him. And it really caused him a lot of anxiety. But because he was raised in an environment in which past lives were considered the norm rather than the exception, he knew it to be true. And he still had a regular childhood, but he had a childhood that was in a place where other children wouldn't have experienced the things that he experienced, because Mr. Cayce taught him how to see auras. He taught him about, he talked about their lifetime in Egypt and creating the pyramids. He taught him how to, about reincarnation, the law of grace. He taught him the creation story. This was all done while the two of them were sitting out on a pier fishing. That was TJ's classroom. That's where he learned all that. What child gets that kind of an education, But that was normal for him. He saw fairies. Cayce created a playmate for him that ended up not being real or alive at that moment. So there was a lot of stuff going on. He heard the Archangel Michael coming through Mr. Cayce during a gathering reading that they had. So his life growing up in the Cayce household, those first 8 years, was unlike anything anybody else. And he thought this was normal. He thought every child lived like that. He had a rude awakening when he started to find playmates at school and go to their homes, that this was not normal. This was not common, conversation.
But at the end of the day, he became a good man, right?
A good man.
And I say a good man because people don't know him, and they probably ask, because those who haven't read the book yet, like, who did he become?
Well, I'll be honest with you, Vanessa. He became really a recluse. When Mr. Cayce died when TJ was 8 years old, 8.5 years old, Mr. Cayce had promised him a second reading when he was 13, and obviously he didn't get that. When Mr. Cayce died, everything was sort of thrown up in the air because they were desperately trying to save the readings and save the ARE. So Gladys could no longer spend the time with him that she used to. His parents still weren't there for him. He was thrown from pillar to post. He thought he was going to be educated and raised totally in the ARE and that they were going to, tutor him. And that didn't happen. And so he sort of got the reputation of a hippie who just kind of hung around. He was a source of embarrassment for some of the people there. He ended up not having any purpose in his life as the way he thought he was going to. He had a number of nondescript jobs over the years. He married multiple times, and then when he moved to Charlottesville a few years before I did, this is where we met here. He he was a house husband. He was raising herbs and selling them to restaurants. And then his last job, he was roasting coffee beans at a local coffee shop. So he never really attained any of what you would think the former Thomas Jefferson would attain. However, if you listen to him, if you were to talk to him, if you attended any of the lectures that I organized for him, it was there. You could hear it in his voice. You could feel it. He was mesmerizing. People could not get enough of him. He commanded a room like nobody else. Does he remember everything about the Jefferson life? No, he remembers some really key points of it, though, which I outline in the book, where these memories would just start to bubble to the surface. But my point in the book was that I really think that people have misunderstood what Cayce meant when he said, this soul could do for the world what Jefferson did for this country. I think Cayce was grooming him to share the Cayce legacy with people. They always said to me, Joanne, if everybody in the world read the readings, all the answers to humanity's questions are in those readings, if only people would read them. Well, who better to share that than him? He read all the readings. He used to, he was sometimes out there when Cayce was doing readings. He was around that material. It was embedded in him as a child. So he was the perfect spokesperson to carry on Cayce's legacy. And of course that didn't happen. So I think that was the more important aspect of it than becoming some sort of, taking on some sort of global initiative, coming forward as, hey, I'm the former Thomas Jefferson and here's what I think you should be doing. There are a lot of souls here in Charlottesville alone who think that they were Jefferson. So it's interesting that he's not the only one, but they don't have the pedigree that he does, and they certainly, didn't have the greatest psychic of all time saying that that's who he was, and they didn't have the experience as a child the way TJ did when he was 3. He started reciting the Declaration of Independence to Edgar Cayce and told Cayce, I wrote that, 3 years old, and then there's other instances where he was quoting himself. So there's a lot more to his life than I think, we know about.
Yeah, and Joanne, since you have a long experience with past life regression and people who are watching us, sometimes they may be asking, as people usually ask me, like, Vanessa, what are the risks of getting to know of things we forgot? For example, I'll give an example. There's a book named The Messengers. A spirit author wrote it through a renowned medium in Brazil, a spiritist medium named Chico Xavier. And in one of the chapters, it talks about when a medium reveals people's previous lives and the risks of passing that barrier that can be that may actually, instead of boosting the person to the right direction, deter the person because of ego and several other things. So I'd like to discuss with you, since you have a very deep experience as a therapist, for those who are here with us, what are the risks of engaging into getting to know things that we don't need to know? Sometimes you need to know, sometimes you don't need to know. When it's spontaneous, it's the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
what would you say to people who have these questions in mind?
I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And in my experience, spirit does not reveal to anybody anything that they can't handle or anything that, when I do a regression, I say, we're going to go to the past life that's most impacting you today. So this is the lifetime in which issues came up that were not resolved, and they carried them forward into this life to work on them. Now, it could have happened 1,000 years ago, and they only decided that in the here and now is when they wanted to work on it. I have some reservations about obtaining past life information from sources other than yourself. Because that information is coming. I'm not saying that these people aren't sincere. I'm not saying that they're not gifted. What I'm saying is that when it comes through somebody else, it is filtered through their consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the information directly from your soul, you're only going to get information that's going to be of service to you in the here and now. Maybe you may not like what you see, because I know a lot of times, I tell my clients, you may experience something or see something in the regression that you don't want to share with me because you're ashamed of it, or because you just don't want to say it out loud. I said, but go ahead and say it out loud. I've heard it all. Nothing surprises me. You're given this information for a reason. It is unfinished business. It is impacting you right now. And oftentimes that information, just in revealing it, releases you. It gives you a sense of, I understand now why my life is the way it is. I understand that I'm the author of the life that I have now. I'm the one that planned it this way in my pre-life planning session. There's been a lot of work done on life between lives, and I actually did a research project of my own on that, which I wrote about in my book.
Mm-hmm.
I did it to myself again. And what I show people is, when we're going to go to a life in which you might have done something to somebody might have done something to you, in which you experienced a trauma or an illness, or you could have experienced great joy and happiness. Many regressions I do with people, there's no trauma involved. There's no anything really heavy. I mean, they see that they have had beautiful, peaceful lifetimes, and that's mostly because their soul is on vacation in a way, maybe between two lives that were a little bit more challenging for them.
That's true.
No, I don't see it as ever getting anything that you can't handle, or that it would open a door to some information that you aren't supposed to know about. You wouldn't get the information if spirit didn't think that you were ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
I have some clients that they have there's just a block there. They can't get to that information. That's because spirit doesn't feel they're ready for it. So, that's been my experience over all these years, that it's always been a valuable experience for people.
So would you then who, as also is asking, isn't that painful for people who are asking, who should go through the therapeutics of a past life regression?
Well, sometimes you don't understand why your life is the way that it is now. I mean, you've exhausted every possibility. You've gone to your minister, your therapist, your friends and family, and you're like, I don't get it. And I know when I did my research project on chronic illness, for instance, I had heard Dr. Norm Shealy, who's an expert in medical intuition, talk at the ARE, and I was astounded when he came out, and the very first thing he said was that he felt that all illness was related to a past life. And I thought, wow, for a medical professional, an MD, to say that, mainstream MD, I thought, wow, there's something to this. So I did a whole research project about physical karma. And it was amazing, the end result, because when people found out where the origin of the issue or the chronic illness that they had came from, it was a tremendous relief for them. And I had many simultaneous healings, or spontaneous healings, rather, where just finding out the origin released it. And there's story after story in that book, which is Karma Can Be a Real Pain,
Yes.
that talks about the value of and Cayce did that too. Cayce gave a lot of readings in which he would tell people, well, the reason for your weight issue in this life is because in a prior life you made fun of people that were obese, or maybe you starved to death in a previous life. You would be amazed at just knowing the origin of the issues that you're dealing with now, how powerful it is to be able then to release and forgive, and then to move on.
Wow, that's amazing. And for Edgar Cayce himself, he was so committed to helping people, so ethical in his practice, and yet the controversial aspect of him releasing that huge information about Thomas Jefferson to TJ Davis. What would you like to say in that regard? Because we know it's not simple. Edgar Cayce did so much good, but in that regard, uh, it didn't unfold as expected.
Yeah, and it's not that Mr. Casey was wrong.
Hmm.
It's that, again, it goes back to free will.
Okay.
You could have the most glorious future predicted for you. That's a possibility that's out there. But you, at any given point in time, can decide, I'm not going there. I'm going to take a different route. Casey found a school that he wanted TJ to go to. It's called the Mowing School in New Hampshire. It's still there. The woman who founded the school, Mrs. Beulah Emmett, and Casey had done a life reading on her, and she had been uh, an assistant to Aristotle, and therefore had been there at the same time that Alexander the Great was being tutored by Aristotle. So Casey knew they had crossed paths, several thousand years ago, and he thought this is the perfect soul to take TJ under her wing and to teach him uh, and get him ready for this work ahead of him. But what happened? TJ was only a little child at the time that they were going to send him off. The reading said, yeah, that's a great idea. Mr. Casey wanted him to go. Everybody, Gladys wanted him to go. And at the last minute, his mother changed her mind and did not send him. He will tell you that that was probably the most pivotal moment in his life, when he was on a trajectory and then it went in a completely different direction. So yeah, the things that Casey saw were all possible. He was being groomed by Casey. You know, like I said, when they were on the pier, he was teaching him all about all of these mystical wisdom of the centuries, and yet, his mother decided, and Casey died so early, and things happened. Things happened, and he never fulfilled that. But that's what free will is all about. You have these. You can have the most lofty lifetime predicted for you, and if you just say, "I'm not going there. I'm not doing that," that's it. It all changes.
I agree with you because willpower is the most important part of us. And if we decide to go into a different direction, or people, especially as you said, for a child,
Yeah.
and this is such a current topic because during this pandemic, Joanne, you may have heard and seen the struggle of all of us parents of kids and the schools and the issues, and such a critical moment when all parents were being asked, are you really parenting? Because before the pandemic, we realized we were just sending children to school, sending them off to school, after school programs. They would come back, spend time with us 2 hours a day, and that's it. And then the question is, are we really doing our share in regards to this, the raising of this soul? And then we already know the answer because majority of parents say no. And yet they're like, I don't know what else to do. So you're talking about the group of souls
Yeah.
that are committed to that child and how much that impacts in the long run. Several psychological studies show that whatever they experience in childhood is going to pack in the long run of life. And this case wasn't different.
Yeah, yeah. I
In
think
spite
that
of
I
the great
think the
past.
the group of children that are in now, I think, have a really big job ahead of them, and so they really need to be supported. My daughter is a teacher and a parent, And so, when I'm with my grandchildren, I'm always mindful of them as souls. When they first were born, I was there when they were born, and I promised them I would do whatever I could to support them in this life. And so I keep that in mind with my grandchildren more so than I did with my own children, because I wasn't quite there when they were little in terms of my knowledge and my experience and understanding. Yeah, I mean, TJ was given everything that he needed while Mr. Cayce was alive. He had the most extraordinary upbringing. And like I said, he saw things that no other child really had seen. Um, I told him, even when I met him, he was already in his 70s, and he was concerned that he didn't have enough time to change things. Even though I said to him, you can still do this work. You're still with us. You can make that choice. But he chose not to. So, the old expression, you could bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. So, I didn't want to interfere karmically with him. So I was kind of walking a fine line. But I was there for him. And I'll tell you, the conversations we had were just extraordinary. He's 85 now, and is having some challenges with memory, and so it's not the same as it was before. But really, that's why I wanted to write the book. I wanted to share as much of our conversations and his viewpoint about growing up in the Cayce household and having grown up with such an important past life affecting him. Even his life as Alexander, he didn't really want to talk about that one. He'd say, "Oh, I don't think he's so great." And yet when he was in Europe, he actually subconsciously followed the same path that Alexander did. And Gladys told him that later on. And people were responding to him as, because when we meet people that we knew from another lifetime, there's a recognition on soul level that happens. And so we respond to them that way. And he had that experience. And here in Virginia, kind of the same thing. He's been up to Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's home here in Charlottesville, a couple of times. And there was one time he went up there, and they do a naturalization ceremony every year, swearing in new citizens of the United States. And so he wanted to go up there to see it. He said, "I want to see something good that's happening." So he went there, but he went late, and there was no place for him to park. And the attendant said, "I'm sorry, but you have to leave. You can't come in." He goes, "What do you mean I can't come in? I'm Thomas Jefferson." And the attendant said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Jefferson, but there's no place for you to park." So those are some of that. That's a lighthearted experience that he tells in the book. But there were some others that were synchronistic, to say the least. The way everything kind of melts together is really fascinating.
So, for example, sometimes the world, as he said about Alexander the Great, and I find his take on it so interesting, because we in the Spiritist literature have a book named 2000 Years Ago about the Roman senator who was great for his time, but it shows a new angle to his life, showing that for society he was the greatest. But deep inside, he had a spiritual mission he didn't fulfill when he was called by the Christ. So, next book, he reincarnates as a slave, but he knows everything about Rome. He knows everything about everything. And showing to us that, life goes on, you continue learning and growing, and you may be great for the world, but for you as a soul and for what really matters in life, you're not there yet. Thus, some circumstances we reincarnate. The question now to you, since you researched much about the life of T.J. Davis, is the circumstances in which he reincarnated in this life.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have anything to do with that life as Thomas Jefferson, for example, he had slaves. He had his hands on slavery somewhat. And then, the way he reincarnated, the parents he had. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. He has said that the slavery issue is the one issue that he's most upset about. That bothers him all the time. And in this life, he shows absolutely no sign of bigotry at all. I mean, even from the time he was a child. And there's stories about that in the book. He even joined the NAACP when he was a teenager. And his Gladys's husband was involved with that with the civil rights movement. So he is very mindful of that and very contrite about that. So I think that there are elements of the Jefferson life that he is atoning for. He karmically has the same problem with money. Jefferson died bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
CJ is living in pretty much abject poverty right now, living only, his Social Security, covers his mortgage, but that's about it. He's been reliant on help from other people for many, many years, and so I would say that he doesn't dwell on the Jefferson life because he doesn't think it's important. Other people think it's important, but he's not starstruck by it. He doesn't go around saying I was, except that one time, which was funny. But he doesn't go around bragging that he was like some of the other Thomas Jeffersons that we have here in Charlottesville who brag about it all the time. He doesn't do that. He's very humble about that because he really believes that this whole lifetime is about Edgar Cayce, is about the Cayce work. It's not about Jefferson. The only thing I would say about the Jefferson life is that people, when they find out that he had been Jefferson in a previous life, they become starstruck by him. They like I mentioned to you before, when he gives a talk, everybody's mesmerized. They look at him like, you were Thomas Jefferson. So he commands an audience. Now, that audience is for him to share the information from the Cayce readings, about who we are as human beings, why we're here. So it's at a much higher level. It's dealing with the soul rather than the politics. And so I think the Jefferson life was meant to enable him to garner an audience. And once the audience came, and especially if they believed he had been reincarnated from Jefferson, they were already believing in a more spiritual, esoteric path, so that it would enable him to have a platform on which he could share all the knowledge that's in the Cayce readings.
Wow. And that's the highlight of the book, I think, because many people nowadays, they believe that you're going to be great in the standards of the world, which is all about fame and power and politics and influence. And so many kids I know nowadays who dream of being influencers. They're like, I want to be an influencer. I want to be a YouTuber.
Yeah.
Right? And then you talk about the legacy that was to be fulfilled that was much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Right?
We didn't understand it. I mean, I think that he got a lot of ridicule because people looked down at him. Oh, you were supposed to do this great stuff. You didn't do anything. You didn't accomplish anything. And he had to live with that his whole life. Imagine that burden. Which is why when we got together and I was just determined to get this book out. I wanted his true story to be told, and I wanted, as a past life regressionist and researcher, I really wanted to get the message across that it doesn't matter who you were in a previous lifetime. Your soul has lessons it needs to learn, and you're going to bring that in at one point or another.
Mm-hmm.
So and you're going to work off that karma. He knows he has karma to work off that he's accumulating in this life. So
Mhm.
he knows he's coming back again. A lot of people go, "This is my last lifetime. I'm not coming back again." Well, and I said, "Really? Did you accomplish everything that you set out to do?" And so, but he knows he's coming back. I know I'm coming back. So
Not coming back.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Well, eventually we'll all graduate.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of your work, is to show that um, we have a commitment with on high to progress. And of course, through that pathway, we are here in the connection with people in the world.
Right.
Our greatest commitment is with our conscience. And there will be lives, as you said, in which we will go through struggle. Sometimes we'll go through lives that are seem to be very, like you said, a vacation,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Not so much nowadays during the pandemic. It looks like not many people are in vacation at the
Well,
current
we all decided to come in knowing, that there would be this challenge,
Yes.
and so, there's a purpose for and a reason for everything, even if we don't see it. Edgar Cayce said there are no accidents. There's nothing that's random in life. It's all synchronistic. So the people that are in your life, the soul family that you're traveling with, these are the souls that have been with you for lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. They change roles, they change gender. So your father in this life could have been your wife in another lifetime, or however we switch it up, but it's still the same group. It's the same soul pot. So I'm very, very honored that I was in the same soul group as the soul that was Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Cayce. So learning about that, learning the lessons, and having, when you do a regression and you can recognize people from another lifetime, they don't, like I said, they don't look the same, but you recognize the essence of their soul. They feel the same, you know. And you can get that through a regression, because you see so and so in the previous lifetime, and you go, oh, you seem so much like my mother in this lifetime. Well, probably is that same soul. That really helps with forgiveness issues, because they came in with a purpose. They came in to help you learn a lesson, even if that lesson is painful. And when you learn the lesson, some people come in your life, they change your perspective on something, and then they leave.
Mhm.
Well, that's all karma. So it's really quite fascinating, and I feel as though it has limitless possibilities for people's healing and for their transformational ability to grow on a spiritual level.
Yes. It's fascinating to talk with you, Joanne.
Thank you, Vanessa.
It feels so therapeutic because you're so careful about the topic that it's still unknown to some people, or they are so familiar but yet afraid. And when you bring this book, and I'll repeat the title of the book and the picture, I love the picture of the book here.
Yeah, and that's Mr. Casey holding TJ when he was a baby.
It's fascinating. Edgar Cayce and the Unfulfilled Destiny of Thomas Jefferson. I think we see ourselves there and ask the ultimate question: am I fulfilling the
Yes.
reincarnatory plan, my promise in this life? And what would you say to people who want to have a measurement, like an assessment, a thermometer? How do I know if I am on the right direction?
Well, I work with people in that pre-life planning session. We do a regression first, and then we go to this pre-life planning, and you see how you worked it all out with the council of elders, who are there like your guidance counselors. They're there to help you design the next lifetime. You find out what your soul's purpose is. The karmic issues you're working on. You know why you chose your parents, because we do choose our parents. The people who came in with you. So all that information is there. all that planning, that whole planning session. Uh, if you say, I'm going to work on the issue of abandonment in my next lifetime because I abandoned somebody in a previous life, then chances are in this life, somebody at some point down the road is going to abandon you so that you can experience what that's like and balance that out. So all the information is there. It's always been there. All you have to do is have a sincere desire to explore it. And that's what regression work is really all about.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you talked about the ultimate reconciliation goals in this life. We're still much about it on Earth, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Ourselves and the people in our lives.
Right. Instead of blaming.
Yeah.
In my practice, a lot of people will come to me and they'll blame their parents, they'll blame their spouse or their other family members or their friends or their colleagues for everything that's gone wrong in their life, instead of looking to see the path that they deliberately went down to experience those challenges that came up, and that you have an opportunity to work through them and get beyond them. And once you're beyond them, that's it. You don't have to deal with them again. So that's the value of the work, to understand that we are the authors of our own destiny. And we really, it's not a matter of, when you choose your parents, you're choosing you're choosing your socioeconomic background, you're choosing your religion, you're choosing your nationality, you're choosing where in the world you're going to be living. All of that coming into the life, but you selected it for a specific reason. So this work goes inside the soul to examine, all of your lifetimes are recorded in the Akashic records. Cayce would go there to get information for the readings that he did. We go in the soul. Let your own soul tell you your story,
Mm-hmm.
and how you have come, the journey that your soul has taken from the time of creation, because we were all created at the same time, and till now. Now, some of us have come to Earth more than others, but nonetheless, we've all been on a journey, and the journey has often intertwined with other souls and taken us into different directions. So it's all extremely valuable information to have, and it's yours. It's at your fingertips. You just need to have a desire to know what it is.
Exactly. Self-knowledge, that inner work, and the beauty of progressing always. I think that's the most hopeful message, is about telling people that we are here to progress.
Right.
We are here to progress.
Yeah, I have a friend who had a practice she used to say regress to progress. I think that sums it up.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Joanne, we could talk more, and hopefully we will invite you for more opportunities here at Cardiac Radio, because our audience really appreciates you, and we appreciate the depth of your work, your ethics, and the fact that you're publishing these books to really make us reflect on our own selves,
Yes.
what we're doing. So
I'd
we
love to come back.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like just to ask you one more thing. If you would like to share a message with people who are nowadays, especially at this very, very current time when a new wave of coronavirus is around, and I know so many people who got sick here in Europe, in Brazil, in other countries, in Canada, and they are like, oh my gosh, I just thought it was over, and here it comes again. What would you like to share with them as a kind recommendation from your experience?
Well, I think that this time has enabled many of us to prioritize our lives, to prioritize where we want to go, what we want to do, and let go of things that are no longer serving you. I know for me, I did that. It's a time to sit. The universe is giving you time that you didn't really think you had before, but it's sort of forcing you now to step back and to look at your life and where it's going and what changes you may want to make. And I think it's changing the perspective for a lot of people. And again, I know that there's a lot of tragedy associated with this. There's a lot of fear associated with this. I mean, just the other day, my daughter said that my 3-year-old granddaughter, the daycare she's in, called and said she'd been exposed to COVID. So now, we've got that fear. Oh, she's 3. She's not capable of being vaccinated. What is this meaning? And all of us are kind of coming together, as a unit, like a village, a family, circling around, in an effort to protect. This is a very challenging time on so many levels, not just, with the diseases that we're dealing with, but also with, our politics and the future of our country, the country that Mr. Jefferson helped to found. So there's a lot of challenges coming up, but know that spirit is always with you. It's there for you to tap into, to give you direction. So you're not alone in this. And just remember that.
That's beautiful. I want to thank you time and again for your time, for your book, for your works, and for your message, Joanne. Thank you so much for being with us at Kardec Radio.
My pleasure, Vanessa. Thank you.
Thank you. So, dear friends, as we are here wrapping this up, if you want more from Joanne, please do so. Go to joannedimaggio.com, JoanneDimaggio.com. Get to know of her books, her services. She has a lot to help us with. And if you have any question or suggestion, we are here at Kardec Radio with you, listening to you and nourishing our souls together. Thank you, friends. We hope to see you next week when we have more at Health and Spirituality. Thank you.